I am the body snatcher. You know we love tummy tucks on this show. Welcome back to Boxing.
Welcome back, loyal fight fans, to another round of boxing. You know me, I'm your humble host, Tummy Tom O'Neill. I am the body snatcher, but first and foremost, I'm a humble guy, a boxing fanatic who appreciates the thumbs up and the subscriptions from you guys. If you're boxing fans and you enjoy the content, I'm coming live and direct to wherever the hell you are in this world once a week. So we are going to talk about, obviously, the Charlo Castano 2, the rematch. We covered that first fight here on this podcast, and we are going to do a deep dive talking about that fight a little later in the episode. The very first thing I want to do is talk about Saul Canelo Alvarez and his loss to Dimitri Bivol. We did pick Canelo to win that fight. I said, gun to my head, maybe 11th round TKO. And I think the most important thing to touch on here is to not lose sight of, God bless Canelo, and his will to be great. What he's left and given of himself in the sacrifice for glory. And greatness in combat sports is really kind of unparalleled, especially in this modern era. There are other guys that have obviously done fantastic things, but all his fights are hard fights. And last week we talked about that his opponents deserve some respect, because basically, when you're more of a casual fan who just tunes in because your friends are watching it because it's Canelo and he's a star of the sport, he's a worldwide star, you get a lot of people that don't always watch boxing. And my whole concern would be those people watching their first Canelo fight, or even if they've seen a few of them, and saying, the problem is, I guess he kind of sucks because I've never heard of this Russian guy. But that's the problem with boxing, is that there are stars, and you have to earn being a star for sure. If you're a star in boxing, you have earned it, and it has to be at bare minimum from the things you've achieved in the sport, and your record and whatnot. But also, a lot of times it's combined with whatever sort of promoting yourself you're doing, and interviews you do, and just kind of being a lovable character or a villain or whatnot. But if you're a star in boxing, you've earned it either way. That does not mean that there are not other fantastic, incredible boxers who are not stars for whatever reason. And Dimitri Bivol is certainly one of them. He is undefeated. He's not Kovalev, where he's older or coming downhill, or you could say this is cherry picking. He's an undefeated fighter with a fantastic record, with wins over the best people in his division. He is no worse than number 2 under Arturo Beterbiev in that division, and he's young and in his prime. So, for Canelo to move up to that weight period is dangerous, and we did say that before, even with the Kovalev thing. But he was able to get Kovalev out of there. He lost a lot of early rounds to Kovalev as well. We had also touched on the fact that with Canelo, I have seen over years me, being highly impressed of him, but also me, thinking that he's lost fights, more than one, more than two, at least 3, maybe 4. The first Triple G fight was one of them, right? The Arislandi Lara fight was another one. The Austin Trout fight was a little bit, sketchy. He's had a lot of them in his day, and so that's due to his boxing style. He's a fantastic boxer. He does make people miss. So even like in this fight, where he's getting kind of landed on quite a bit, he's constantly all the way to the end also making them miss a lot, and blocking a lot of shots and counter punching with hard shots. And when Canelo and his accuracy, He almost will never throw a punch that he misses. So sometimes he seems almost too reserved. But these are the things of why judges, whether you agree with it or not, and I haven't agreed with it in the past. That's what I'm kind of saying here. But it's about, what's your flavor. You like the guy walking someone down and throwing shots even if they miss a lot of them, even if they tire out and lose some later rounds, or do you like the guy that can box, make people miss, who they're not missing punches, though they might not throw so many, and they're extremely accurate, and maybe they have had the most powerful flush shots throughout the fight as well, even if they are few and far between. That's kind of how Canelo has lost some of these fights that he has had, in my eyes and in many other people's eyes. It was from that. It was from because people were outboxing him. Even like I'd mentioned, he got Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders out of there, and congrats to him. But the announcers, the unofficial scorecards, and even the official scorecards from the real judges, they all will kind of always just talk about Canelo or what Canelo's doing in there. And they're kind of oblivious usually in Canelo fights. It's like a thing with him to kind of be oblivious of rounds that he's losing in there. Like Caleb Plant did pretty well before he got stopped. And that was late in the fight. Billy Joe Saunders, that was just a brutal KO, and that wasn't even that late in the fight. But he did all right. But I thought he hands down lost that Arislandi Lara fight. I thought he hands down lost that fight. And that was due to slick boxing, people staying away from him, making him miss, and then he's not used to throwing so much as well. He wants to counterpunch, so when people make him come forward and they're slick enough to make him miss, dance around the ring, block shots if he gets too close, and counter him sometimes as well and look slick doing it, I thought he's lost to people like that. This Dimitri Bivol fight was different because this is the very first time where I saw somebody bully Canelo constantly, walk him down. Triple G tried to do it and had really a lot of success doing that as well, I guess, in the first fight. But even then, Canelo was not really hurt at any points. He was getting combinations thrown at him that he could be slick, make him miss a bunch, and maybe he gets caught with one, but it's never flush. He got caught with real flush shots in this fight. Now, why did he do that? It's simply because it's not to take anything away from Dimitri Bivol. Dimitri Bivol's great, and he couldn't just be bigger. He had to box very well to win this fight. He had to be cautious of counter shots from Canelo, who's brilliant at doing that. And it didn't matter he's smaller. Canelo hits very hard, and his precision, his timing, his catching opponents off guard while they're throwing shots in the middle of throwing a punch. His ability to do that is something that Bivol knew he had to be careful of, and he did, but he managed that with a healthy relationship of managing that with also aggression and walking him down, but never getting too greedy about it. And he kind of fought the perfect fight. But yes, do you know why those? You know what's the most successful shots on Canelo? He had moments, and especially, as the fight dragged on further and further, where he was just against the ropes and had already been beaten up a bit. And Canelo did, and he had moments of getting tagged to the body and let Bivol kind of calling off on his guard a bit. But really, the most clean, flush shots whipping Canelo's head back was the 1-2 down the pipe that would split Canelo's guard. The first shot kind of gets through, was partially, and the second, boom, straight right hand down the middle, just would whip his head back. This happened several times in the fight, and that's not. And that in particular is one of the things that is not anything to do with anything else than Bivol being a much bigger guy. Sure, he had 2 inches of height, he had 2 inches or 3 inches of reach, but the most important thing as well is being all around bigger than Canelo, which a lot of his opponents are. He had more muscle than Canelo. They rehydrate, and Canelo shouldn't be at that weight class. He probably had 25 pounds on Canelo, or 20 pounds or something, and I mean that. He probably had 20 pounds on Canelo Alvarez. 15 bare minimum, and he has the height and reach advantage. And when he's a bigger guy, who certainly knows how to throw punches as well. He's splitting the guard because he's a bigger man and his shots are more powerful. Have you ever seen anybody split Canelo's guard like that? No. And so things like that, we really need to put into context here and not so much just say, wow, either any of the sort, like either Canelo's falling off at least a bit, or that, wow, Dimitri Bivol's so good and look at how hard he hits. He's a lot bigger. But like I said, the credit to Dimitri Bivol is that, he didn't just rely, he was always cautious enough. And another thing that was good from both guys that I liked seeing in this fight was of awareness, of fight IQ, was along the lines of Dimitri Bivol being aggressive, walking Canelo down throughout the entire fight. What I mean is he's also cautious enough as, later on in that fight, you saw Canelo, who had been getting hit up, and like I said, shots splitting his guard. You saw him get against the ropes and then actually keep his hands completely down and just kind of, do a bit of this, because his hands are down on purpose, because Canelo knows, I'm losing this fight. And these are like the last 2 rounds of it, the 11th, the 12th round. He's doing this to try to lure Bivol into swinging wild at him, because his hands are down and because he's cornered, and he's purposely doing that so that he can try to land a perfect counter. But that's credit to Canelo still trying to the end, and that's credit to Bivol because he was hurting Canelo a few times in this fight. He even dropped Canelo, might have been a slip. They counted it as a drop. Either way, he was breaking through his guard with those jabs, straight right hand down the pipe, and he was getting Canelo against the ropes and winging hooks to his guard and shots down to the body, like we're used to seeing Canelo do. But when Canelo was doing this and being dangerous, he, like I said, Canelo's doing this because he knows he's down and he's trying to win and get a perfect shot. And also, on the other hand, Bivol's right there knowing what's going on. He was hauling off more when Canelo had his guard up, and was trying to get off of the ropes, and fresher in the fight in the beginning. He was hauling off more, and then he actually would tap and just kind of wait with Canelo while Canelo's, with his hands down. He never fell into that trap of throwing wild at him because he knew what was going on there as well. So both guys, were just kind of, it was great fight IQ from both guys. But yeah, that's my concern is, Canelo Alvarez is usually, we all know he's a super middleweight, right? So he's a super middleweight, but yet at super middleweight, he's always the smaller guy. Liam Smith, I forget who it was. It was Callum Smith, I think, or Liam. It might have been Liam. I get the Callum brothers confused, but he had a bunch of belts. That was the first victim. That guy's had I think 5 inches of height or 6-inch height advantage on Canelo. Way more reach. That guy was way bigger than Canelo. Okay. Caleb Plant, not as built, not as jacked as Canelo Alvarez, but a taller guy, more reach. Billy Joe Saunders, maybe a little equipment, but still had a bit of an edge. These people that Canelo's been beating at super middleweight, again, this is showing you his greatness. He cleaned house in that division, got all the belts and the Ring Magazine belt. He took belts from these great fighters, these great and undefeated and still young fighters who were bigger than him. And he did that there, and this was a bridge too far for him to move. But this is kind of the sad things that will happen sometimes, and you just got to make it where it's not that sad. Because this is what will happen when somebody like Canelo exists, that they're not satisfied with being ranked number 1 pound for pound on every single list. They are not satisfied with not being a world champion, but unifying every single belt in the division. They need more and more, and when you get greats, all-time greats like this, they will push the limit all the time. They don't, and maybe in the beginning they have people, coaches, fans saying, oh, don't be crazy, you have so much. Maybe in the beginning they do, but people around them, even myself included, fall in line with this eventually once you see somebody doing these incredible things time after time after time, it makes people, and myself included, it makes people start to believe that that anything is possible. And Conor McGregor and beating Jose Aldo as an underdog, moving up the next weight and nobody thought he could do it, moving up the next weight and beating Eddie Alvarez as an underdog. People forget about that time period, and that is why he got the Floyd Mayweather fight. That is why he came back against Khabib, and the match made no sense. The guy, can't wrestle at all. He's fighting the greatest wrestler. The guy doesn't do anything but really wrestle. The match never made sense, but you get caught up in this kind of like anything is possible kind of thing, and certain people make you believe that. Bernard Hopkins fighting into his 50s, for God's sakes. Then he got sent through the ropes, just sent to hell, landed on his head real bad against Joe Smith Jr. finally, at almost 50 years old or something. So this is what will happen when you keep pushing your limits. But that is what greatness is. Never giving up on finding out, like taking the next hard thing. And I just want a good appreciation for people like Canelo Alvarez, who, he shouldn't have, you can say he can totally do super middleweight. Obviously, he's just done it. He's conquered it. But my whole point is, like, if you go on the typical, how much does a guy weigh? How big does he look compared to other opponents? You would normally people would say he should be at middleweight, not at super middleweight, and then certainly not at light heavyweight, So yeah, it's just seeking greatness, and this was a bridge too far for Canelo. All right. So moving on from that, here comes the Charlo Castano rant from the Maniaco, the Maniac. I'm going to do a deep dive for you guys on this one. We covered the first fight. It was a fantastic fight. Back then, I thought it was a fantastic fight, and I believe I said that. But I will say, this is kind of some of the fun that comes with doing these podcasts and the research for it. Because I rewatched the fights. So before days before this and earlier today, I rewatched a few times Charlo Castano 1. And I always knew the fight was good. It was very action-filled. But I used to think Castano won that fight. So now, here's the deal. I still kind of agree with that. I still kind of think that Castano won that fight. But upon, revisiting this fight again, it's a lot closer than you'd think. I had Castano 7-5 for rounds, right? 7 rounds to 5 for Castano. I can still get down with that, but they called this fight, they didn't give it to Charlo, they called it a draw. So by no means, I totally recant thinking this was just, this is a shit show, a draw, are you kidding me? I still give it to Castano. I scored Charlo for round 2 is all the way up until 9. But then I did score Charlo for 9, 10, 11, and 12. And including 2, that'd be 5 rounds. So I had it 7 rounds to 5. But some of these rounds are very tough. 3 was the most brutal from Castano. That was his most dominant round. But round 4, you could flip-flop that round either way, man. I've just rewatched this fight multiple times. There's another round in there too, but 4 specifically, you could flip-flop either way on who you want to give that round to. And if you didn't give it to Castano, then that would make it a draw, dude. That would make it 6-6. So it was a great fight. Now here's some points I'll just throw out for this upcoming fight. They're going to run this match again. Long anticipated, long awaited. It's a unification bout of titles. So we've always said this. We said this before the first fight with Castano. We've been saying this. We said this back in the Tony Harrison fights, and this proven true in that first Tony Harrison fight as well. Proven true again in the first Castano fight here. Charlo needs to incorporate more just prodding jabs. Jab to the body, jab to the head. Just mix in some of those jabs, because Jermell Charlo lives and dies on that he hits extremely hard, and he waits for counter shots, to pick his shot perfect, and then he can boom, set it up and connect on a perfect counter. So that's a good game plan for him. It has worked. All that he doesn't need to have a new game plan. You can just keep that same game plan and incorporate throwing out a couple more jabs out there, because you're losing rounds and rounds and rounds of multiple fights now that you've lost or got draws on. That because simply, not because you didn't hurt the guy, you always will hurt the guy, even if they don't give you the fight or it's a draw, even if it goes all the way. He'll always hurt the guy, right? He'll always find a good counter shot in there, more than once usually. But that gets you the round, so that's like, you won 2 rounds and we're fucking in round 9. That's like a typical Jermell Charlo fight. Not his brother Jamal, but that's a typical Jermell Charlo fight. So, but all you need to do is just incorporate, you just have the same game plan, but incorporate, throw out some more jabs. So when rounds are a little more like, people always have to lean to the other guy. They're trying, they're walking you down. He also is too comfortable sitting against the ropes because he wants to counter somebody. He wants somebody to be throwing wild punches at him. So I get it, but you're too comfortable being on the ropes too long. And when people just see somebody walk down, they might not land a lot on you because his defense is incredible as well. A lot of those shots are to the guard, but you're not throwing back, and then you're getting hit to the guard, and eventually if you're getting your guard and your head rocked around, last 1 or 2 will slip right through and catch you, and so that's his whole thing, man. And I've always said this. That's what Jermell Charlo needs to work on, is just being a little more active with like normal prodding jabs. Not everything has to be, he's either not throwing at all and waiting to counter somebody and being defensive, slipping and blocking, or he is hurt somebody off of one counter shot and then walking them down with a ferocious, intensity for a good 6 seconds. And then, if that doesn't do it, he subdues back to the original. So you can't do that. You just got to be a little more active so that, short of you ending someone's life, they're not just giving away the rounds on you, and that's always been my thing with him, man. Now, I think that in that first fight, we saw Jermell losing all these rounds, but as I mentioned, I gave him 9, 10, 11, and 12. Now, do you know why I gave him those rounds? Well, I gave him those rounds because, lo and behold, that's when he was starting to try to walk Castano down with jabs and straights and going down to the body, and then hooks and hauling off of Castano when he's pushed to the ropes. For fuck's sake, this is what you got to do. So no, it worked for him. I have to think, dude, and he had the Tony Harrison fight. He got a loss for it. Oh, I shouldn't have lost that. You should have. You're not throwing enough punches. Then he had the second one, and he got Tony Harrison out of there. It was great. Landed hard on him multiple times. So that shows he's good in rematches, at least. Now he had the Castano draw, which you could argue maybe he should have lost. You cannot argue him winning that fight with Castano, that first fight. But he's good in these rematches, and I have to think he will be here as well. I have to think that doing that stuff in those later rounds and just being more active, that not only him but his coaches, which is what they're there for, I have to think that Derek James is in there telling him, yeah, look, this worked for us in these last rounds, and maybe the game plan there was wait till those rounds purposefully so that Castano would be more tired, knowing he's an aggressive guy. But you have to just start doing this earlier. You have to start incorporating jabs. You have to start throwing more shots earlier. And not every single shot has to be a life ender. You pick those shots in between scoring shots in general of any sort, right? So I have to think he'll see that and that he'll come out and he'll do that better earlier and be more active in this fight. I also think, upon rewatching this, that God bless Castano, because he does not hit as hard as Jermell Charlo. He does not have great defense like Jermell Charlo. He has plenty good enough defense, but he's an elite fighter, and so he gets that respect, right? So he is an elite Castano. So in giving him that respect and comparing him with the other elite fighters, no, his defense is not very good, and he relies more on throwing such combinations ferociously, and it seems like they never end, that he won't give people an opportunity in between to try to throw counter shots. Jermell Charlo is one of the best counter punchers in boxing, and he did counter Castano a couple times, but man, this fight was 12 rounds, and he was few and far in between did he actually catch Castano really good. Maybe twice, 3 times at most, with counter shots. And he's probably the best counter puncher in boxing. So, Castano, God bless him for standing in there with Charlo like that. Not that he just not fight him, but that he still was just like, I'm just going to be me and just walk this guy down, and I'm going to relentlessly throw. If he hits me and counters me good and I don't go down, like short of me getting killed or going down and getting knocked down, I'm just going to continue the onslaught through it. I'm going to push through it and that's what he did. And what an amazing fighter that guy is as well. But yeah, he doesn't really have that great defense, and I think that we could see him get one clean counter shot that he gets put to sleep from Jermell Charlo. We're picking Jermell Charlo to win this, okay? This rematch. Because I have to believe he'll let his hands go more, man. I have to believe he'll let his hands go. I do not, under any circumstances whatsoever, and I'll just stop doing this fucking podcast right now if Charlo gets put away or even a TKO, a stoppage. That won't happen. And so the fight will either go all the way, or if it's stopped or somebody's put out, it's going to be Castano's like dead in the middle of the ring. God bless him, because he is just such an exciting fight. He's just coming forward, and a lot of his shots are real wide too, man. A lot of his shots are fucking hooks and stuff, So it's possible that Charlo gets him out of there with a clean counter shot in between these flurries, but I think the main point is that he'll learn to throw more shots in this fight and to be the one walking Castano down at least earlier. I'm not stressing, much like watching that Canelo fight, which I did stress out about. I'm not stressing with these kind of guys, and he's similar to Canelo in this sense. I'm not stressing if Castano's winning the first 2 rounds or the first 3 rounds. That's a little normal. But you cannot wait until round 8, round 9 to start fighting and throwing a bunch of shots. You cannot wait that long. It's fine if your strategy is wait till later. A lot of guys, that's their thing. It serves him well. So it's a good idea probably, but you have to pick it up earlier. You have to really be picking that up 4th round, maybe 5th. 5th's the latest. You have to be intentionally trying to win rounds, even if you can't put the guy away, starting the 5th round. And you have to be mindful. Derek James in the corner has to be mindful of how many of these rounds are going to us, do I really think. Let me not be a yes man with Charlo in the corner. And let's definitely, we try to always get the guy out of there. We're a power puncher, we're a puncher, counter puncher, power puncher combination. So that's what we try to do. But we need to, at this elite level, and with these crazy guys that are going the distance with us, we need to be bagging up more of these rounds. We can't rely on this fight not making it the distance or good chance we lose. That can't be the strategy this time around. And I think that will about cover it. I think we did the fight justice here talking about him. We're picking Jermell Charlo, and I think, he might get him out of there. But I haven't decided if I do that or a decision. You probably want to look at what the over-under is, and If it's like over, nothing crazy, like 10.5 rounds, it probably will be. If it's less than that, if like it going over, 7 rounds, you want to pick that, and you can get better money out of it. But until next time, loyal fight fans, stay loyal, enjoy the Charlo Castano fight, and we're back at you next week with more boxing talk.